All right, everybody, we have a bioweapons alert on U.S. soil in the USA. You might have heard about this story or you might not have heard about it yet, but we had the FBI, the CDC, and other government organizations raid an unlicensed biolaboratory, one that is run by Chinese operators on U.S. soil in the U.S. state of California. Now, here at this laboratory, they found all manners of diseases that could be genetically mutated and disseminated to nearby military facilities. I want to read to you a little bit about either the misinformation or the information that we're hearing about it right now. This is NBC saying that they found hepatitis, HIV, herpes, coronavirus, and other diseases in a lab full of mice, medical waste, and hazardous materials. This was in the U.S. state of California. The Fresno County Public Health Department, they say, is evaluating and assessing recent disturbing activities of an unlicensed biohazard laboratory. The health department's assistant director said in a statement that all of the biological agents were destroyed at the time, but that a legal abatement process by the agency kept some of them on hand. The evaluation, they say, required a coordination and collaboration between multiple federal and state agencies. So this was happening a couple of weeks ago. And what we're starting to see now is the watchers are beginning to question whether this was a single Chinese-run laboratory, or instead, is this part of a multi-state international biological attack or the lead up to an attack for what can happen in the USA. I reached out to a virologist earlier this morning and I started asking some questions, ones that otherwise you would not want to put into Google because those would quickly be flagged and you'd be brought up the line of potential contacts and people that should send three-letter agencies out to your house. But I got an email back from one of the virologists and we were starting a communication chain about why they would start a laboratory or potentially in the United States of America instead of genetically mutating or altering a disease in another country and then bringing it over. He said that we do have some stringent control measures in place and that if you wanted it to look like an outbreak started inside of that country, you have to literally start the outbreak inside of that country. Now, we talked about some of the locations nearby, about how we have military bases, we have huge populations nearby, and what that really means. And, he said that with the identification of diseases that were present at the laboratory, you would be building or have potentially the building blocks for a biological weapons laboratory and facility. This, of course, should be so startling to everybody in the USA that it should be blasted in some sort of breaking news alert all across the USA, but they don't want that right now. Now, that makes me think, why don't they want that right now? Because we already know that the USA is trying to condemn China on multiple fronts. They're getting the American people ready right now for a large-scale Chinese war as soon as China tries to take Taiwan. So why not right now use this to fuel them to be angry at China for doing this? Well, a lot of it has to do probably with accountability, but what happens is they probably don't want the people that are operating on U.S. soil to know just how far they're looking into it. And so if you fully come out and condemn this, that's going to draw state governors, that's going to draw local government to further scrutinize similar activities or the importation or even transfer of materials that could be used in some sort of bio lab. And it's going to potentially bring people up to speed that the US government might be looking for them. Is that happening? Well, we don't really know. But what we do know is that the coordination that it takes to run an unlicensed bioweapons laboratory on US soil is something that is definitely going to be state sponsored. Now, whether that's truly China, could it be the USA acting, as a Chinese front company? Absolutely. Could it be Russia looking to be a Chinese front company? Sure. Could it be another country, maybe a U.S. ally that really needs the USA to go to war with China? Could they be acting as a Chinese laboratory agency and running these operations? That's certainly possible. We've seen in previous iterations of the CIA their catalogs of information and what they've done in the past, that it's part of the formula to get inside of another country and sow chaos inside of that nation without the government knowing that it is an outsider or a foreign agency doing this. So could we see a false flag? Well, sure. But the problem is we won't know until it's too late. And because they have already kind of screwed the pooch here on how they will react to a biological agent, it is going to be too late. So if you see some sort of laboratory created disease get unleashed in a major area like California of the USA, it's game over. You had better get your together as soon as possible. You better have your group together. You better have everything that you need, and you better know and understand biological containment and control measures. Now, you have to think of what happens when I go into a hospital. Okay, they have certain amounts of biological containment and control measures. Of course, there's the things that everybody knows inside of every doctor's office. You know, they've got the bright orange or what's supposed to be kind of a red bio garbage can. Well, of course, that makes sense for blood-borne diseases. But what about diseases that aren't just blood-borne, especially any sort of mutated disease that maybe spreads very easily between people? Well, here we have laboratory mice that they were potentially infecting with what could be, who knows? Could it be airborne HIV? Could it be some sort of airborne, disease or more virulent form of hepatitis? Could we see an already unleashed disease be further modified to become really, really dangerous, not just take out 1% of those infected and maybe 1 or 2 more through cardiac events? And then, of course, we have the chemical pharmaceutical agents, taking place after that. But then could we see a 5, 10, 15% fatality rate in a unleashed pathogen? Certainly. I mean, we live in a time of technology. Look at what some news we brought up today, that they literally just brought back to life a 20,000-year-old worm. Kelly says 26,000 years old that they just brought up from the earth. It was frozen and brought it back to life. Why are they doing this? Why have they brought these viruses back to life? Why have they done all these things? It's certainly not because they have our best future in mind. No, their intention is weaponization, power, control, and wealth. Well, with weaponization, you get power. With weaponization, you can sell it, you get wealth. And with weaponization, you get control because everyone's afraid of you. We've also seen some biological experts come out and say that without a doubt, right now we are operating in a time where agencies of foreign governments and those within the USA, we all have the ability to control an entire population. They have created a disease that can wipe out certain breeds of chickens and only those breeds. They've also created laboratory modified diseases that can wipe out only cows. Well, what does that stop them from creating a laboratory disease that can wipe out only Anglo-Saxons, or only those of Asian descent, or only those of Russian current heritage or the majority heritage, the genes that are prolific inside of an enemy state? Well, that's kind of where we're at. And that's why Putin right now, remember when COVID was happening big and Putin wouldn't allow himself to get swabbed by any agency out there, any government. It just wasn't happening. He'd stay far away. He'd stay in a bubble. It didn't matter. You weren't putting that Q-tip up his nose. Well, that's because he knows you could either infect him with something at that time, or you could gather his DNA. They could modify a disease that would literally only kill Vladimir Putin. We live in this sort of era. And it used to be, remember, decades ago, what did we have? We had the food tasters, right? And those food tasters for the kings and queens, they would taste it first because that was the easy way to change a regime. You would just add a little poison into the mashed potatoes, change the sweet potatoes up to be a little bit spicier than usual, and off goes the king. Well, they had the food tasters. Well, now we don't even need that, but we still live in that day and age of huge administrative assassination attempts. It's just now run by governments with different agencies around our world. So it's not too big of a surprise here that they say certain rooms of the warehouse were found to contain several vessels of various apparatus. They say we saw bodily fluid, serums, thousands of vials of unlabeled fluids, and suspected biological material. Hundreds of mice at the warehouse were in inhumane conditions. And they said the CDC came in, they found 20 potentially infectious disease agents, coronavirus, HIV, hepatitis, herpes. An investigation found that this might be just the beginning of what we start to see here soon. So this is a bioweapon warning for you guys. It's time to start thinking like you live in a world at war, because the governments aren't going to stop. They're going to keep you thinking like everything is okay. But then at the exact same time that they're taxing the literal out of you, they are going to go to war with other nations that make your life harder. So get ready. Do everything that you can and be just as prepared as you can. Special thank you to each one of you for being here today. Make sure you check back tomorrow for more information and headlines from America and from around the world. From my family to yours, please stay safe and keep watch.